Hello, I'm Arif Farudin from Asian Agribase. In this podcast about why Salmonella vaccination is crucial in poultry, my colleague Rajeswari Ramani interviews Dr. Nicholas Phuah from Elanco. Dr. Phuah, a 20-year veteran in the industry, will tell how Salmonella contamination can be minimized and reduced, beginning from vaccinations in chicks.
Hi, good morning, Nicholas. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to the session.
Okay, can you tell us what is the prevalence of Salmonella vaccination in the Asian region for poultry, for both layers and broilers, and why should they be obligatory?
Okay, there are differences in terms of layer and broilers. However, I would say in general for layers and broilers, the prevalence of vaccination is actually very low. Layers have a higher margin. Broilers could be considered no vaccination at all. This could be due to the fact that the vaccines that are available right now, most of the vaccines that are available right now are not suitable for the broiler market. The live vaccines may be considered for the broiler markets, but due to registration in the different countries, there are no registered vaccines that are available specifically for the broiler market. But in my opinion, it should be obligatory because the food safety has become a big issue, and it will be a bigger issue in the future as the quality of life improves and the demand for good, safe protein becomes more.
I see. What about for layers?
Okay, for layers, the prevalence is still relatively low because most of the farmers over the last couple of years, they have been slowly being exposed to the presence of a vaccine in the markets. However, the prevalence for vaccination is still relatively low because a lot of farmers are still a bit reluctant to use vaccines. A lot of the uptake of vaccine in the ASEAN countries are mainly larger farmers who are looking at more towards export markets. This form of thinking should change in the future as the demand within the countries increase for foods, for healthy food and safe food. Unfortunately, right now, the prevalence is still low, but we do see certain countries where there is an increase in the prevalence. For example, Malaysia, Thailand. The uptake of the vaccine for layers have increased over the last couple of years. As I said, broilers right now, they don't have a specific vaccine for broilers. However, there is vaccination in broiler breeders, and the prevalence for broiler breeders is much higher compared to the layers. Now, this is important where they vaccinate the broiler breeders, and then they're producing salmonella-free day-old chicks that will become the broilers. And then if they maintain certain practices within their farm, they are able to maintain the salmonella-free status within the broiler farms.
Is there a reason why there is a less prevalences for Salmonella vaccination in the region?
Well, part of it could be due to the fact that there was not a lot of focus on the Salmonella vaccine for this region. At the same time, in terms of food safety and things like that, there was not a lot of focus on Salmonella in the industry over the last 20 years and things like that. Over the last 5-10 years, there has been an increase in interest in food safety. So because of that, then the introduction of Salmonella vaccines became more and more prominent. But because how do I put this? The layer industry, for example, they already do a lot of vaccinations. To be honest, there's a number of vaccines that they do regularly. So whenever a new vaccine is being introduced, they do take a longer time to accept new vaccines. And because a lot of these Salmonella vaccines are mainly for food safety, which means that the impact of the Salmonella are more in humans than in the poultry, and they see that the poultry are still healthy, so it's not a big consideration. That was historically that's what people were thinking. Now it's a bit different because there is a demand for food safety, so there's a lot more focus on controlling Salmonella in the farms. This we have seen in a lot of countries in ASEAN over the last 5 years, an increase in interest in controlling salmonella in the farms. But the introduction of the vaccines have been a bit slow, partly due to the registration process of vaccines in the countries. And then part of it may be also due to the cost of the vaccine itself.
I see. So do you see a rush to vaccinations when outbreaks do happen and it's publicized, like the case in Malaysia this year with Singapore temporarily banning eggs after detecting salmonella?
And I actually see the opposite, to be very honest.
I see.
Because traditionally, although we said that the vaccines have been introduced a bit later, right? And traditionally they use other methods to try and control salmonella. Let's take Malaysia, for example. The control of salmonella has been around for a long time. Since, I think, 20 years, the idea of controlling salmonella in the farm has been something that we have talked about is in our good farming practices and things like that. However, the control method that was used previously were more towards using things like acidifiers, antibiotics to a certain degree, and things like to try and control salmonella. Now, because vaccine is more of preventive medicine, so when there is and I don't call it an outbreak, it's actually more of contamination than outbreak when the eggs when they identify positive salmonella in some of the eggs. What happens is that the farmers tend to want to look for a fast solution first before they consider vaccination, because vaccination is preventive. So they create the protection and things like that. However, it is not immediate. So you don't vaccinate today and expect that you to be salmonella free tomorrow. It takes time. It takes a lot of other management changes within the farm to ensure that the farm reaches salmonella free.
Okay, interesting. What is the cost for small to mid-sized farms, assuming large farms are already doing this?
Well, if we look at, there are many different vaccines in the market. There are kill vaccines and live vaccine within our region. So if we are talking about adding costs in terms of layers. Now, in terms of layers, actually the cost may be an additional 10 to 30%, whereas in broilers, if they plan to vaccinate, 10 to 20% based of their current vaccination costs, depending on what kind of vaccines they're using. Now, for the broiler market, it's a bit different. For the broiler market, an additional cost may be upwards of 30 to 100% of their current vaccination costs. So for small to mid-sized costs, a lot of them may not consider vaccination due to the pricing of the vaccines. Then there are a lot of different vaccines in the market, but it is something that eventually they may have to move into, because if large farms are increasing their vaccination, ensure that their food safety programs are in place, this will definitely pressure the small and mid-sized farms to also start vaccination, even though there is a bit of additional monetary costs, because as the population develops, our countries standard of living in the Asian countries are improving, so there will be an increased demand in safe food, and that means safe protein. And in this case, if the farms are unable to maintain a salmonella-free situation, this may lead them to losing market share and things like that, because the consumers will pick and choose what they feel that is safe compared to what they may think is questionable.
Okay, I understand that. So what are the vaccination protocols and how should it be administered, especially on larger farms?
Well, in terms of vaccination protocols, then we have to look at the types of vaccines that are available in the market. Currently, to make it easy, there is what we call the live vaccine and kill vaccine. Okay, so the vaccination protocols are actually similar to a lot of the different vaccines that are available in the market, how they use the live or kill vaccines. Right now, I think a lot of people already know what's the difference between live or kill vaccines because of the whole COVID situation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but in the poultry industry, the kill vaccines are a bit different, especially when we talk about layer birds and things like that. Kill vaccine in the poultry industry is injected either intramuscularly or subcutaneous, and then normally 0.5 cc is the amount, 0.5 mil is the amount of vaccine that's being vaccinated. So the whole vaccination protocol, to ensure there's good vaccination practices, the location of vaccination, how deep you go, how much the vaccination goes, and whether it's deposited in which area that you need to vaccinate, that will give you the success in vaccination, whether the uptake of the vaccine was done well. Whereas for live vaccine, the live vaccine is done orally. It's either by drinking water, or in Asia, in ASEAN, there's a method that we call mouth drop as well, where they actually add diluent to the vaccine and they drop it directly into the birds. So in large farms, if they're using a live vaccine, in large farms, normally the go-to method for vaccinating will be the drinking water administration. So then there's a lot of, if we're looking about protocols, there's a lot of different areas that we have to look at: water quality, what kind of water system that you're using, ensuring that they finish drinking the vaccines within 2 hours. All this falls within the parameter of the vaccine protocol. No, so the success of vaccination, other than vaccines, the vaccines available in the market all have their data that supports, and they all show that it does help. I myself am more prone towards the live vaccine because I've seen a lot of success from the live vaccine. However, whether it's live vaccine or kill vaccine, in order to ensure that the vaccine actually helps the farm, the application of the vaccine has to be very important. So the vaccination protocol, when you're doing the vaccination in the farm, it's extremely stringent. You have to make sure the birds actually get the vaccine. You have to make sure that the birds are healthy to vaccinate, so there's a number of things that we have to take into consideration.
I see. What are the considerations that needs to be taken into place? Are there things like avoiding stress in the chicks? And what about other vaccines that could be administered together with this vaccine as well?
From a stress point of view, of course, if you are injecting the birds, then of course that's more stressful. If you're drinking the vaccine, then of course it's less stressful because the birds drink all the time. So in terms of that, there is one way of reducing stress. But it really depends on how the administration is being done. So even if you're using killed vaccine, there are ways of trying to reduce the stress, although you literally have to catch the bird, hold the bird, and inject the bird. Because the bird is not going to comply, not like what we are doing for our COVID centers where we queue there and wait for them to inject. We can't expect the birds to queue and we inject them automatically, right?
Yes.
So there are of course there are steps to do this. From my point of view, where if we are administering the vaccine together with other vaccines, it is done in the market. You can actually give 2 different kill vaccines at the same time, or you can give 1 live vaccine and 1 kill vaccine at the same time. It is fine. However, we do, if possible, always recommend not to do the vaccines at the same time, unless there is data to support that there's no impact. Because we do think about we're not talking about physical stress, but we're talking about stress on the immune system. So if you introduce multiple vaccinations at the same time, the immune system has to allocate energy and things like that to the different system, and that can be a bit more stressful to the birds. So if it's possible, you want to, of course, vaccinate them separately. If it's not, then you can do it at the same time, providing that they are different. The vaccines have different target organs, and then you want to, of course, keep the birds as stress-free as possible, depending on the situation.
And what kind of assurance does these kinds of vaccinations offer consumers as well?
That's not an easy answer to easy question to answer, because the thing is, preventive medicine works in the fact that we are trying to introduce our vaccine strains to the birds to prevent external strains, the field strains, from entering. In this case, is Salmonella. Now, if you vaccinate, of course, under all circumstances, if you do vaccinate the bird, whether it's live or killed, or live or kill combination, depending on what's available, it does improve the situation. It does ensure that the number of, in terms of broilers, let's say in terms of day-old chicks that are being produced, the number of birds that are salmonella-free is reduced. The number of eggs that are contaminated will be reduced. However, controlling salmonella only depending on the vaccination is a fairy tale.
Which brings me to the next question.
Okay.
How does the Salmonella outbreaks occur, and how can they be prevented apart from the vaccination route?
Well, okay. Then at here, I want to make a little bit of correction. In this case, when it comes with Salmonella, we don't really call it an outbreak, to be very honest, because the birds itself is not affected. And it only becomes an outbreak if there's a cluster of people that consume it and they had the diarrhea and things like that due to consuming the contaminated egg or meat. So when it comes to birds, it's not really an outbreak unless it's Salmonella that causes harm to the birds themselves. So in most cases, when we talk about food safety, we're referring to Salmonella typhimurium and Salmonella enteritidis, right? So how it occurs, there are two ways. Let's take the egg for example. One way is when it transfers from the layer directly into the egg. So this is in the bird we call it intra-ovarian. So it's good. That means the bird has Salmonella, and then the Salmonella goes into the egg while they are forming the egg in the reproductive organs. That's one way. But to be honest, the prevalence of this is actually very low, because the egg itself has a mechanism where it's within the egg itself, it is able to reduce, to control, to kill certain bacteria. Okay, so it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen. However, this prevalence is relatively low. The main way of egg getting contaminated is actually through the environment, because the surface of the eggs, especially when it cools down, there's a lot of pores. So the Salmonella from the environment, whether it's on feces, whether it's on the dust and things like that, even or insects or other rats and things like that, it can cause contamination on the eggshell. And then this can lead to two things. One is contamination on the eggshell, which you can get positive, and then the other one is the bacteria can enter the egg and contaminate the inside of the egg itself. So in terms of contamination, there are two forms. That is the external form and internal form. The external form, both are just as dangerous, because if it's contaminated externally, it will eventually contaminate internally as well. So if we relate that to why we vaccinate. So when we vaccinate, the main purpose, one main purpose, of course, to prevent Salmonella going from the layer or the breeder to the egg. Okay, but another reason, and this is a very important reason, is that by vaccinating, especially when you vaccinate with live vaccine, this actually prevents or reduces the colonization of the field Salmonella. By reducing the colonization of field Salmonella, this prevents shedding, and then this reduces environmental contamination. By reducing environmental contamination, you then reduce the possibility of contaminating the eggs or the chicks in the farm situation. But the whole chain is actually very wrong. What I've been describing right now is mainly the farm area. But I did mention that the environment contamination can be not just the farm. It could be everywhere. It could be in the trucks that are transporting the eggs. It could be in the collection area. It could be in the warehouse. And Salmonella, unfortunately, Salmonella can come from many different sources. Even the workers, your packaging and things like that. If you're not careful, there can be contamination for Salmonella, and all this leads to the eventual possibility of a Salmonella outbreak in humans.
I see. So that means like when the vaccination is done in the layers or the broilers, the internal contamination can be reduced.
Yes, that's right. It can be reduced. But if given early enough, like for example, some live vaccines are recommended on day one. So if given early enough, then you can to a certain degree prevent Salmonella from entering the intestines and colonizing. However, if once the birds have already been contaminated with Salmonella, where they have already had enteritidis or typhimurium entering the system, then these vaccines is unable to completely eradicate the field Salmonella from the system, but it's able to hinder growth. So it reduces the population, reduces the problem.
So the biosecurity measures, hygiene and cleanliness together with the vaccination works much better overall.
Yes, and that's applicable to all diseases. Yes, biosecurity, hygiene, cleaning and disinfection. So our approach to food safety, for example, the people I work with and also the farmers that we do work together with to control Salmonella, we look at all aspects. We look at everything from rat control, insect controls, beetle controls. We look at the feed. We look at the equipments being used. We look at biosecurity, both macro and micro. So we look at all different aspects, and we do verifications so one of the things that we do is we actually enter the farm to look for risk factors. What are possible areas that Salmonella can contaminate the eggs or the chicks and things like that. So we go in, we will help to identify the risk factors, and then where possible, eradicate the risk factors. Where not possible, then we set up interventions to try to reduce the impact of these risk factors. It's a lot of work, but the outcome is actually good.
Okay, that's great. So, Nicholas, thank you for coming on board today to enlighten us about Salmonella control and the vaccinations. And we hope to see you soon again in another podcast, perhaps.
Well, sure, anytime. Just let me know.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you received the pertinent information on why vaccinations and good biosecurity programs are optimal solutions for Salmonella contamination. You may listen to our other podcasts on our website at www.asian-agribase.com. We hope you will join us again soon in our next industry-specific podcast. I'm Arif, signing off for Asian Agribase.